You can kind of divide it into a couple different categories. There is the Spanish influenced decks, the German or French influenced decks, and then just the northern decks. So the other thing to keep in mind is these are used traditionally for playing games with, but they are also used to divine with. Hi witchlings, welcome back to my channel. It's me, your local chaotic witch hunt. And today I'm doing like a little introduction into Scopa cards or regional playing cards. I'm not actually sharing how to read them or divine with them because I'm still learning. That's not something that I'm doing in this video, so if you're interested in that, I request that you look somewhere else. I'm just going to be talking about them and why I think they're really cool. This is something that I wasn't familiar with till I was later, and I see a lot of people who are, especially in Italy, be like, oh my god, this is such a like normal part of my life. I can't believe you like think it's this cool. I love loving things. This isn't something that I knew about or had access to up until until I was an adult and was reconnecting. So I have a bit of a different relationship with it. I just think it's really cool, and I think it's very cool that Italy has their own playing cards. So to kind of start off, Italian playing cards are not the same, like the regional playing cards are not the same as kind of our idea of what playing cards look like. All the regions have different playing cards. Most of them are in North Italy, and there's Romagnoli, Emilia-Romagna, Bresciani playing cards, Triestine playing cards, and a lot of northern cards. For the southern Italian decks, we really only have three, and that is Sicily, Naples, and Sarde, which is kind of considered south, but also an island. So what's very interesting about regional playing cards is they're formatted completely differently than our understanding of playing cards. There's only 7 numerical cards, un donna, un cavallo, y un re, woman, a rider, and a king. Scopa cards, I call them Scopa cards because that's what they're typically used to play with. They are used to play Scopa, Broom, a lot of different very Italian specific playing games, and the history of them is very, very rich. So you can kind of divide it into a couple different categories. There is the Spanish influenced decks, the German or French influenced decks, and then just the northern decks. I have a few. I have three decks, 2 of which are vintage. The first deck that I have is the Naples playing card deck, and so what I learned from my friend in Sicily is that for the most part, people just play with the Napoletane deck. So this is what it looks like. It's Spanish influenced. And so there are 4 suites: un denari, the coins, un spade, the swords, un coppe, the cups, and una bastoni, the batons or the wands. Very similar to a traditional tarot card reading, but these are used to play with. So a few examples is you have the assos, which are the aces, which typically have like pretty cute things. This is un donna. In my deck, it looks more like a page, but it is like the woman in this deck. We have un donna, un cavallo. I'm looking for the re, the king, so I can show that. King. Yeah. So those are the kind of ones, and those are all from all different suites. So like I said, there's only 1 through 7 in the numerics, and then 3 of those cards. So it's a lot smaller than a traditional playing card deck. The cards you need to know if you're gonna play Scopa: Sette Bello, Suite 7. The riders, the kings, they're all important and they have a certain amount of points. It depends on how you play. It depends on if you're playing like primero or not, but you typically get a point if you have the most pentacles. You get a point if you have Sette Bello. You get a point for every time you sweep the board. And I think primero is most cards overall, but I'm not sure. I don't usually play with primero. So as you can tell, this is a Spanish influence deck. Un cavallo. Come on, there we go, un cavallo. This is a Spanish deck. Many decks are made either by Modiano or, God, there's another one that I forget the name of, but Modiano is the one that all my decks are from. So that's kind of what a Naples deck looks like, but where they get interesting is that all of the regional decks are different with different influences. So the next one I'm going to show you Siciliane deck. The Siciliane deck is special because it actually has little illustrations on the cards. So we have the 4 of Cups, 4 de Coppe, with some people sword fighting in the middle. And then we have the Three of Swords that has a cup on the side. The Three of Cups has just a house. Three of Pentacles has a man holding something. Looks like a fan. So there are similarities between the Naples deck and the Siciliane deck, but at the same time, the Siciliane deck is the only deck that has kind of these little illustrations. The Sarde deck has a few in the 4s, but not in multiple cards. Like Five of Swords, this. So the other thing to keep in mind is these are used traditionally for playing games with, but they are also used to divine with. And it kind of depends on the method. This is a vintage Sardinian deck. Very pretty. I'm actually not quite sure if the Sarde deck is considered Spanish or not. It looks Spanish, but it doesn't look the same as the other two. Though the Sarde deck looks like it has some illustrations as well on it, similar to the Sicilian. So all of the decks are different. You know, I don't have any northern decks right now. Well, I do, but they're for my shop, which, by the way, there are vintage Scopa cards and normal playing cards in my shop if you're interested, because if you're like me and you love vintage cards, that's for you. So these are kind of the more traditional ones made by Modiano. Here is una donna. Up. Hey, there you go. This looks like a cavallo. No, that's also... I can't tell the difference between the donna and the king. Whoops. And then we have the asos in this deck. So some of the cards look more similar to traditional Spanish playing cards than others. Some of them have more flourishes or illustrations, like the Siciliane deck. And then some of them, in general, are just cute. I have a vintage Pavesi deck, which Pavesi is a cookie company, and it's got cookies on it. My mom made me keep this. I was originally going to sell it in the like vintage Scopa section of my shop, but they it's like treso, strudel, og. I don't know what that is. Actually, I haven't had an og before. And then Ringo, because it's a circle. So what's interesting about this deck is that they have like more of a traditional like king, donna, e, cavallo format. It looks a little more similar to kind of what this one has actually queens in it, which I think is interesting because the numerics really only go up to 7. I think I have to check. So it is like an Italian deck, but it includes a jack and a queen instead of un cavallo y un donna, which is why it's different. There is also, I haven't figured out how to play with these yet because I don't know what is supposed to be which suite. I don't know what the sette bello is. So 7, but it has a jack and a queen instead of a donna y un cavallo, which is interesting because then we can look at the queen as un donna and the jack as un cavallo. What's really interesting about Scopa cards and regional playing cards is that they're used to play like Italian card games. You can, I guess, technically use them for non-Italian card games, and there are a few games that my friend in Sicily was talking about that I really enjoy, like that you can use the Scopa cards for, the regional playing cards for. But I didn't realize that Italy had its own regional playing cards until I started reconnecting, which is one of the many things that I think was lost in my family is like playing Scopa cards. My bisnonna definitely played them though. My mom, yeah, was like, yeah, she probably did with her friends. Scopa is a really fun game, by the way. It's very competitive. It's also kind of like luck and strategy, which I feel like most games are. There are a few gambling games that were talked about or played. It's always really interesting to see kind of how the changes or what people's favorite game is to play. But the Scopa cards are interesting because of their regionality, and you can see the definite Spanish influences. There is like one northern deck that has some rogue Spanish influences versus French influences versus just the northern decks. They're literally just northern. And there are even like maps online of which regional playing cards can be found where. But what my friend Cicely told me is that most people will just play with the Naples deck, which is the one I have wrapped in here, and the one that I use for divination. So if you, like me, are very much interested in these cards or in divination. You can find some online. What I've realized very quick sourcing them for my shop is that import tax sucks. Import tax is bad. Everything has import tax on it, even my favorite pasta. Keep that in mind. The cards are definitely more expensive when you're outside of Italy or Europe than they are if you're in it. One of the resources I used for divination to kind of start with is Mary Grace Farren's Italian Folk Magic, which is a great book. If you're Italian and you're watching this, you may already know how to divine with it. Another friend is gonna share with me how to learn with the Sicilian deck, because there's a specific way of doing it. I think there's only 28 cards that have meaning. And by the way, reading with Scopa is going to be different depending on region and family, which is why I'm not going to sit here and be like, this is how you do it, because there's not really one way of doing it. Very similar to tarot cards, where there is like set meanings for the cards, but even in when you read regional playing cards, the meanings also change depending on like the information and the sources. So you have to kind of keep that in mind when, you know, you're doing a reading or someone else's. But learning with Scopa and learning divination is infinitely different from tarot, and the ways it is different are kind of like this. Similar to what we would know as like Lenormand or Sibylla decks, there's a little bit more of a storytelling element there. A lot of times the cards are relying on the context of the next card, the card next to it, the card in front of it, to tell a complete story. By itself, if I pulled one card, I probably wouldn't get a really clear answer unless I was asking a very simple question. It's also very easy with Scopa cards to get to have a specific question. I've tried general readings, and this may just be my deck and my kind of method of reading, but I've tried general. It does not work. You need to go in there and be like, is this happening? And that's either gonna, and then it's gonna tell you. Another method that was shared with me by my friend Dean Norman, who at some point hopefully will be teaching a class about this, I hope, is you know, split the deck and then you pull. And if you get a certain amount of pairs, and every time you split and pull, it means a yes or a no. And then if you get a certain, you can read those pairs from there and get more information about the situation. I very much like the yes-no method, and then kind of expanding on that, I found it to be a little more structured than some of the other methods I was trying, specifically because I feel like a lot of the times when I'm going to these cards, I am asking like a yes or no question, and then I want more context, so I look at the pairs. You can also just read them pair together, like pull 2 cards and do a 2-card reading. You can do obstacles and advice. You can do a full like spread, but it is very much contingent on the cards around it. And maybe as I get better and grow as a reader, I may have kind of more information about each of the cards and have an easier time reading one card by itself. But for right now, I tend to do a little bit more of the pair reading. I also by far do not have them memorized. Typically you'll see the different kind of numbers, assos, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, having different meanings, as well as the donna, cavallo, the re, the king. And then from there you can kind of look at the suites to get more information about what area it's covering. Something I noticed too is that the different kind of suites are typically represented by different groups of people. So merchants, sailors, traders, etc. And that's something to keep in mind when reading too. You could be finding someone with a very specific like job coming into your reading. I also found them to be very practical. They very much are, you know, when you pull a reading for someone, you're reading it and it's like, oh, you're gonna work more next month. Or, oh, yes, but these are the obstacles in your way. It's very practical, and I like that as a reader, not more so than the tarot, because tarot is obviously like the first thing that I ever read, but it's definitely noticeable enough. And I find that in a folk magic context, or in a context when you're reading and seeing who put the evil eye on you, or if there is an evil eye there, it's very good. It's gonna be like, yeah, this woman, and I'm like, ah! So that's kind of my little introduction video to Scopa cards. Maybe eventually I'll be able to share reading techniques with you guys, but I am by far not nearly as expertise as some people that I know of, as well as some people who are probably watching this video and in reading them or divining with them. Stinky. So I think keeping that in mind, because someone was like, I'd love to see all the meanings on your YouTube channel. I don't have all the meanings. But yeah, like I said, reading with the different decks is also interesting because there are certain ways to read like certain specific regional decks, and I find that super interesting as well. So you are kind of learning a slightly different divination method every time you pick up a new regional deck, which is why you typically only read with one. But yeah, I'm very excited to continue learning and to continue expanding. If you're interested in looking at the decks I have on my shop, especially the vintage ones, you can head on over there, chaoticwitchon.com, or you can, you know, look at the ones that are not vintage and get one of those. But yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching this video. And yeah, my cat is now laying on me. Stinky Cat and I say, remember to drink water. Siate benedetti. Say meow.